Welcome, everyone, and members of the Society to Advance Financial Education to this, our professional investor segment. I want to offer a special welcome to those of you in our meetup groups, both in Chicago and Atlanta. We're glad to have you joining us. This is a very special broadcast we do each and every week, bringing professionals from the industry directly to you. One of our favored guests is Mr. Geoff Garbacz, principal of SuperStock Investor and Quantitative Partners. I've known Geoff for 20 years now, and he has been instrumental in servicing some of the biggest institutional hedge funds you can imagine with the best research available. Geoff has agreed to partner with the Society and help our groups run private equity groups. So we've talked with some of you about setting up these private investment clubs, and we're pleased to have Geoff with us today to talk about it. So Geoff, once again, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve.
Okay, well, volatility sometimes can be said to be your friend, and as you and I have talked about the meetup groups and their investment clubs, you've talked about helping out with some strategies you have in mind. Why don't you dig into that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, we're having a lot of volatility every day. I mean, typically 6 or 7 programs are getting activated during the day by the machines. Remember, 70-something% of all trading is machine-driven. So it's, I think it's a great year if you can understand how to take advantage of that. Yesterday, an options index trader, I saw an opportunity towards the end of the day to get long calls in the S&P 500 via SPY. And we were out by 10:30 this morning and made 19%. I'll take 19.10%. I'll take that all day long.
Now, let me ask you a question. As you say that, everybody you see in the industry, especially in the newsletter side, touts their winners. What percent of trades do you think historically and in the future? Obviously, there are no guarantees in life, but what would your estimate or expectation be on the percentage winners and losers?
Well, I don't think I know what they are because I track them, and I every single trade I get done, it goes into a spreadsheet and I track how it does. The batting average is anywhere from depending on which of the two we're looking at. The low is 78% and the high is 83%.
All right, and then let's follow that up with something you and I've talked about often as you've reviewed strategies I've brought to you. What about drawdowns? Do they wipe you out in that one bad trade?
No, not at all. I mean, if you look at the two services, options index started, let's see, it'll be 3 years in November, and we're up a couple 100%. I think we're up like right around 200. Actually, I'm going to go into my computer here and give you an exact up-to-date number, which kind of shows that I know what my numbers are. 185.96%. So that's what we're up right now. Since starting at the very end of 2012, so that's pretty good. And then Golden Energy is options trader is up 4,673%. Started in 2007. So I expect this to be actually a big year for options index. I mean, this may sound really arrogant to say, but I'm going to be up over 500% by the end of the year.
So, again, we want to emphasize there are no guarantees in this business or any others, but the history you've had, at least as long as I've known you, has been pretty consistent. So, Geoff, what drives this? Is it a function of you outthinking these computer programs?
No, I want to go back to one thing that you said about drawdowns. The biggest challenge with options trading is not to have options expire on you. Something like 75% of all options ultimately end up expiring worthless. Our percentage is like 15%, and I want it down to like 0%.
You know, Geoff, I want to hit something here, and it's so critical what you said. I hope everybody that's watching this or sees this video takes it to heart. When I became a broker at E.F. Hutton, going back many, many years, the specialists on the floor of the exchange would tell you flat out, I'll sell you an option any day of the week, because 2/3 of the time they're guaranteed to lose money. And the options people who come in at the novice level and they hear all these people on the radio and they think it's going to clean up, the fact is they don't, because they hit some of those blow-ups you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you could be wrong. You could have 20% of them expire worthless, and you're going to lose money. So you got to get it down to a lower percentage. I mean, the thing is to take a loss and accept a loss and kind of move on. But sometimes you're like, oh, I think this is going to come back, and then it doesn't. I found that my best trades work within 3 to 5 days. And when I'm doing myself for personal account, when I'm doing intraday stuff, I'm I give myself a very tight leash where I'm like, okay, this didn't work. The entry point just didn't trigger for some reason, and that's kind of all there is to it.
Takes a lot of discipline. I know so many people who just don't have that.
Well, look, it actually comes down to this. You have to be willing to live off of a model, and you can't be an expert. It's funny. I just read a great paper, and I was talking to our buddy Greg Forsyth about it a little bit, and it's called "Are You Trying Too Hard?" The case systematic decision making. And what it argues is that if you're an expert, you're going to ultimately blow yourself up. But if you're model driven, then you're not going to have as great a chance of blowing yourself up. The greatest example they gave in this paper was everyone knows about Meredith Whitney. She was one of these people that nailed the mortgage crisis and did a great job. So she's quote unquote an expert, and she went then off to do the same thing on municipal bonds. Well, she predicted 50 bankruptcies. We got 5. So she was off by a factor of like basically, 10 in terms of being able to get it correct. So she's no longer an expert. Her hedge fund is out of business. See you later. And you know what? If she just did modeling work and stuck to it, she wouldn't have been in the situation she was in.
Yep. It is a fundamental issue of discipline and thought versus emotion and gut.
Yeah, they. As a matter of fact, I got the paper right here. I'm gonna flip to something. I want to read one line, which I think is a brilliant line, and it relates to most people that are managing money. The so-called experts hypothesis, which asserts that experts can outperform models, is intuitive and tells a deceptively compelling story. For example, to most, it seems like common sense that a hedge fund manager with a Harvard MBA and 20 years of work experience at Goldman Sachs can beat a simple model that buys a basket of low PE stocks. The logic behind this presumption is persuasive, as the expert would seem to possess a number of advantages over the model. The expert can arguably outperform the simple model for the following reasons. Experts have access to qualitative information. Experts have more data. Experts have intuition and experience. Then he goes on to talking, and then he says, remarkably, the evidence I will present illustrates that soft information, more information, and experienced intuition do not lead to more accurate and reliable forecasts, but instead lead to poor decision making. And because of this result is so counterintuitive, it makes it that much more important to understand.
Geoff, that is the game. In fact, I think there was an article that I recall that said from 2001, when Schwab bought CIA and interfaced with the Schwab equity rating or released it, from 2001 to like 2009, it was the number one performing analyst on Wall Street, and it was a formula.
Yeah.
And it was that discipline.
They do one better in this paper. They talk about Warren Buffett versus Benjamin Graham. And they take a simple Graham and Dodd low PE model and compare it to how Warren Buffett did in the same time period over all the years, right? Mm-hmm. And one example of where Warren Buffett bastardized Benjamin Graham, he said, oh, it's okay to buy Coca-Cola. Yep. Because there's a franchise there, and a PE of 20 on Coke is really like a PE of 5 on something else.
We'll rationalize.
Now, I'm going to go back to this, and you will be amazed at the difference. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add it up over time, and Buffett is a great investor, don't get me wrong. I mean, he's done a phenomenal job, right?
Yeah. He's got a bigger balance sheet than you and me.
Exactly. So he's obviously done something very correct. I'm trying to find this page.
Geoff, would that article be something we'd want to put up on the society site for members to read?
I do. And you know who introduced it to me is our friend Mark McCarthy. So
very good. If Mark would allow it, just email it to me and I'll post it on the society site.
Yeah. So here are the numbers. The annual return of Buffett is 13.94%. But the Graham and Dodd model did 15.95. And you analyze that over from the time that Warren Buffett started his fund in like in the 60s to now.
A lot of money.
And the S&P did 10.46. So pretty incredible stuff. Pretty incredible stuff.
Very powerful, making the argument for the disciplines. And one of the things I want to mention to the folks watching, as I've watched Geoff evolve over the years, he's not just what I would call a functional expert in quantitative processes, but he's added a trading capability that is unique. Most of the guys that we've worked with, you and I, may be good stock traders, but when it comes to options trading and some of these other things, they're not as broadly experienced as you've been because of the work you've done with Phil Erlinger and other people.
Well, this paper, it's funny how we're morphing into this paper. I didn't think we would morph into it, but there's a really interesting concept which you will relate to, being the CIA guy, and it's called about decision-making, breaks the decision-making process into three components: research and development, and then implementation and assessment. And so basically, you research, develop, come up with an idea. As time goes on, you assess it, you figure out where you can improve upon it, and then you implement. But the way you implement is through a model. You don't implement by I think I want to be long this day, and I think I want to do this day. You don't do that. You let the model drive the process. And what's interesting is I was using a way of looking at the VIX against VXV. So the VIX is a 30-day implied volatility. The VXV is a 90-day. That was working great last year, still working good this year. But then I read another article, and I was like, the light went up. I was like, wow, I need to be looking at the relationship of the VIX to the VXST, which is a 9-day. And you know what? It has knocked it out of the park this year. It has kept me on the sidelines. It has told me that volatility is not going away. And what's interesting, so today is Wednesday, February 10th. We have again had one day where that relationship has turned bullish. We need 2 days of it. And, we got the Federal Reserve Chairman speaking again tomorrow. Yep. So we'll see if she can do that, or if the markets decide to become angry and, we're still in trouble.
Well, so, as you and I know, let them move. As long as you can play the move, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to me, the fact that I had that gain this morning, I kind of knew, okay, I think we might get a run up into her speaking, but I knew as soon as the Q&A started, there was risk because of all the ways that these guys were going to go with their questions. And the way you got to think about it, today is like going into the Shark Tank, and you're getting beat up by Mark Cuban and Damien and the various other people that are on it. Yeah. And tomorrow is it's like high tea. They go to the Senate. There's such a difference between the Senate and the House. The one thing that she does have tomorrow potentially is if she screws up on a Wednesday doing Humphrey Hawkins in the House, she can go take care of it in the Senate the next day. And that's the beautiful thing. And she's done that actually really well a couple times. So I don't think I think the mistake she made today was very simple. She said, interest rate rises are still on the table for March. Who are you kidding?
Yep.
You cannot be serious.
No, and I think most of us we heard that, we just shook our heads and said, are you kidding me?
She came out and said, well, we're going to have 2.5% growth in the first quarter. No, we aren't.
Right.
You have no ability to forecast. The Federal Reserve cannot forecast.
No, let's look at most of the academic institutions, the Fed included. They couldn't forecast the weather.
Well, to that point, I will go to another paper I have, and since I kind of went there, I want to read this as well. This is, we're doing live research here.
Folks. And this you have to understand. This is valuable time of Geoff's and of mine. So we hope you take this to heart. This is good stuff we're doing today.
So let me read this. This comes from Harold Malgrim, who is one of the more brilliant guys, introduced to me by Brian O'Day, who ran overseas for Instinet for a long time.
And went skiing one time and also almost lost his life with you, as I recall.
Yeah. That's a whole nother story.
Exactly.
But here's the line. It says, we have come to a time in the 21st century where computers and information technologies have become far more powerful and are now capable of collecting and analyzing masses of real-time digitized data that does exist, but is dispersed widely across the economy. There is no government program aimed at collecting and correlating what has already been digitized for varying private and public purposes. U.S. government agencies and the Federal Reserve do not presently have either the appropriate data science capability or computer power to evaluate current performance of the economy. And they go on and they say at the very end, our Federal Reserve and government overview of our economy is prepared with mid-20th century capabilities that are half a century or more out of date.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And one of my buddies was telling me about Nate Silver's new book, who is the greatest predictor of elections and everything else, and saying that forecasting has not improved as we've done all this incredible technology over time. You know, it makes you think like, what the hell is going on here?
Geoff, you know, I come out of Wharton Econometrics where we built models that were so sophisticated nobody understood them. So these models that are used by the Federal Reserve and the regional banks are so complicated. The inputs are questionable and the outputs have rarely, if ever, been accurate. Let's remember it was the Federal Reserve that gave us the Great Depression by tightening supplies. And we'll have to see if the Bernanke liquefying program worked. Who knows?
On the next page, Harold goes on, and I think this is a brilliant idea. He says, in fact, using its present data methodologies, it can be not known if a recession has begun until many months later. And it cannot be determined the depth of a recession until years later. What is going on?
Who are these people? Well, let's put it this way. It gives opportunity for people like you and me.
I have been very much against a rules-based Federal Reserve until I really thought through this paper that I read on experts versus models and the concept of, hey, just let the model go, you know?
It would put predictability to it, right?
I mean, one thing I asked a really good friend of mine about this today was, I said, we've got an unemployment rate of now 5%, right?
Right.
And we know that we have labor participation of 61%, something like that.
Yep.
So if we adjust out the current labor participation rate against where we've been at other points in time and kind of blend the two of them together, what is the true unemployment rate right now? And my argument to you would be it's probably somewhere around actually 8%.
Easily. And that's not counting the discouraged workers, and that gets it up around 15.
Yeah.
I mean,
but like 8% probably a more real. And so what are we concerned about the economy? I mean, they're so concerned about the economy overheating because they're looking at employment data.
Right.
And it's idiotic.
Well, you and I know that. We'll hope that Janet and company listen to these broadcasts.
So we've got a little bit off tangent, and you know, but the point is, like, if you're gonna succeed in the money management business, you need to be model driven, and you can't be expert driven, because you could be invested with like Bill Miller, and then Bill Miller has all these great years, he never loses money, and then guess what? Along comes 2008, and he's down like what, 60% or something.
All your money's gone.
But this year he's already down. He's down like 27% this year so far. Well, it's like the guy didn't learn a damn thing from having that really bad year in 2008.
I wish it weren't so sick. It would be funny. Well, Geoff, I'll tell you what, you've given us almost a half hour of your time today, and I'm going to supersede the normal Safe Insight with this broadcast because I think it's that relevant. All of you watching us on these meetup groups, contact myself at steve@safefinancial.org, and let's get one of our investment clubs started for you. And to all the members of the society, pay attention to what we're saying here. If you want to manage your own money, learn these lessons. And if you want someone else to manage it, make sure you write to me again at steve@safefinancial.org and let us find a manager that's appropriate for you. Want to thank everybody for joining us. Geoff, thank you as always for being with us.
Thanks a lot. Have a great rest of your week.